personally, I'm still a little baffled by the absence of Richard Reese in the game plan for Baylor. So he's made just 14 carries on the season, 7 in both games. And admittedly, he has not done much with those carries. So that may be why he hasn't gotten a lot. He's just 2.5 yards a carry. Listen to this, though. So last October, and Jerry will remember this well, Richard Reese had 31 carries, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns against Kansas. The very next week, they go out to Lubbock, night game, 36 carries. Obviously, that's a lot in modern college football. 36 carries, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns against Texas Tech. They win both those games. And then in the 7 games since, these are Richard Reese's carry totals: 4, 9, 10, 15, 8, 7, 7. Baylor is 1-6 in those games. I'm not saying it's all because of that. It obviously is not. But do you think that Richard Reese is in the doghouse, or is he just being outplayed right now by Dominic Richardson?
You can start on that one, Zach.
I mean, I think it's a nature of the way the games have gone, kind of. We've kind of harped on the offensive line kind of being a mess in the Texas State game. Blake Shapen's being pressured. There were Texas State players in the backfield quite a bit. And like we said, I think that improved in the Utah game. But I think the nature of how those games have been playing, Dominic Richardson is a much more physical runner. He's gonna run through people instead of around people. And I think just based on kind of how the games have played out, I think Baylor's kind of needed that. They needed that physicality. They needed that extra bit of, oomph, instead of just kind of the kind of the twitchy nature of Richard Reese. So, I mean, both of you have a much better grasp on what happened the end of last year, seeing it firsthand. But at least this year, I think Dominic Richardson just kind of fits kind of the way the games have been going.
He's playing better right now than
Right.
Richard Reese. There's no question.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of the end of the year last year was that he did wear down. That was, you just told the numbers. That's 72 carries over 2 games. And I think he did wear down. I think he wound up with almost 300 carries, which, was too much for a true freshman carrying that much of the load. This year, I think it's just been, some of it I think has been because of that offensive line. There have been so many carries where he gets hit in the backfield. He's a guy that needs a little bit of space. Dominic, man, you can hand it off to him and he's going to run through people, and that's just the way he plays. Richard Reese is not a run-through guy. He needs a little bit of space, and that's where I think maybe you get him involved more in the pass game, short passes. Again, get him out in space where he's at his best, and I think he can make some plays out there. I thought maybe at one point, because it seemed like he was maybe even lining up there some in the preseason, that he might wind up being like a slot receiver. I think his day is still coming. Dominic is still your power back. When we got AJ Stewart for our podcast, Inside Baylor Sports, little plug there, last week, he talked about still them being a thunder and lightning combo. So, kind of the way Abram Smith and Treston Ebner were a couple of years ago. So I think you might see more of that as you go through the season. But that offensive line has got to get better for Richard to have any kind of room and to be a real factor in the run game.
Does Jeff Grimes have your phone number, Jerry? Because I like that. Get him out there in the pass game.
Yeah.
Maybe you could give Grimey some advice.
Yeah, I'm just going to walk down the hall and say, hey, Grimey, come on. This is what we're going to do. This is Long Island this week. We're going to get Richard involved in the pass game. Going to get him out in space. Yeah, I'm sure he's not even thought of that.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
They only spend like 25 hours a day on this stuff.
Yeah.
No, I like it. I think that's a pretty good strategy. And I agree with you that much as I've said over the last, season plus, that I think Blake Shapen still has some really good days ahead. I think Richard Reese still has some very good days ahead. Yeah. So he's just too talented. And, it is funny though, just how much the game has changed because, Jerry, we remember a time that 31, 36 carries, that wouldn't have been that big a deal.
Right.
But now it is definitely more of a running back by committee, let's keep them fresh kind of thing. And, it's just the way the game has changed. But there was a time you would just feed that guy till his wheels fell. So,
well, and they talked about it before the season that they're going to kind of go with the hot hand. And I think in some ways, Dominic has had the hot hand. Like if you look at those two running back, like you said, Richard just hasn't produced in the times where he has had it. He hasn't had a lot of touches because I went back and looked. I couldn't remember how many catches he had. He's only had 2. So he's had 16 touches in the 2 games. And Dominic has had 34, so 17 per game. So you'd like to get that a little closer. And like I said, maybe get him involved in the pass game a little more. So I look for that. And again, if Richard starts cranking out 10, 12-yard carries, he's going to be the guy and he'll get his chances.
Sure, absolutely. Like you said, feed the hot hand.